to Wednesday's Child. So you're listening to your host, Deborah Watson. I haven't done a flying solo on Wednesday's Child for some time, and I hope you'll forgive me. But that's right where I am today. I'm flying solo. I'm giving our co host Sarah Ledger a break, and I'm just going to waffle into the airwaves for you. So, however, you're joining me, whether you're sticking your headphones in your ears or whether you're kind of wandering around your apartment, listening to me on your tablet, or whether you've got your earpods in and you're out on a breezy walk, or whether you're blubbing into your pillow, whatever it is, I hope you just allow me a few minutes of your space and time just to hear me talk to you a little bit more about Wednesday's Child and about eating disorder recovery. So, as you haven't heard from me and indeed from us for a few weeks, and I'm sorry about that. And, we have every intention of really upping the frequency of the Wednesday's Child pods. But as many of you will know, this is a not for profit. This is something we do as a kind of sideline, second fiddle. It's not to say it's a lesser priority, but both Sarah and I have kind of CEO roles in our own lives. I run my own consultancy, and Sarah is a CEO of a very successful literacy and education business. So lives get in the way, but equally that doesn't sort of take away from the fact that we're desperately passionate about wanting to help people in their recovery journey from an eating disorder. Not least because both Sarah and I, and so many of the people you come to hear on our Wednesday's Child podcast community, like them, we have been through an eating disorder ourselves. And you'll hear more about those stories if you listen back over our podcast episodes, many of which started in the height of COVID when Sarah and I did some brutally candid deep dives into what we'd been through. Sarah was very much an adult when she succumbed to an eating disorder. She'd already got a child. She was married, whereas I was at university when I went through an eating disorder. So we have very, very different experiences, but it's so interesting when you come to learn of people's experiences of recovery from an eating disorder, how the similarities are there no matter what age or stage you were in life when you went through your eating disorder, and for how long, in fact. So that's some of the background. As for me, just a quick recap. Yeah, I developed anorexia when I went away to university. I was, if you like, from a normal 2.4 family. No sort of evident mental health issues, although looking back, desperately crushing low self-esteem, self-confidence, and had a lot of experience of bullying as a child, was a people pleaser, A grade student, thought life was going to be so much better if only I could run away to university and somehow become who I was meant to be and not that bullied person that didn't quite feel she fitted. I'm sure that's true of many people that go through some journey with their mental health. There's someone who, at some age and stage in their life, has felt like, I just don't fit. Why don't I fit? Why don't people like me? Or why do I not like the world I'm in? Why does it feel itchy, scratchy, uncomfortable? And so I hoped university was going to be the right thing for me. Unfortunately, several experiences came to coexist in the months leading up to my university, many of which I see no reason to go through now. They're deeply personal and deeply uncomfortable, some of which I haven't even shared with friends and family. So um, I won't be giving them airtime here, I'm afraid. But, some left me very wounded, and they were exacerbated by things I went through at university. Ultimately, I stayed at university, but I limped through with my eating disorder. So this was in a period of the very late 1990s, and anybody that was around at that time will know that getting help for an eating disorder was probably going to the library and finding one of two or three books that happened to be on the shelves in your local town library, as my poor mum tried to do. Flicking through a book, trying to find a counsellor in a directory, and perhaps, if you were lucky enough, getting on side with your local GP and seeing if you could get a referral. Roll that story forward. I took some time to heal, to recover, to find the right path. And it was tricky, it was challenging, and my God, it was tricky and challenging for my family and my friends and those who love me. I was eventually lucky enough to navigate my own recovery and find love, happiness, and a successful career. And maybe that gave me just the amount of validation and future focus that I needed to fully recover. What that didn't do was ever get away from the sort of nagging feeling in the back of my mind that we are still not doing enough about eating disorder recovery. So I would continue year on year to look at what's changed in my county, my country, around eating disorder recovery from the age of when I was 18. So even when I started looking at creating Wednesday's Child, that was sort of 20 odd years on from that point, but it still felt the whole system was protracted and so desperately in need. Um, we came therefore to develop Wednesday's Child as something which could coexist, if you like, with statutory services. It would be a not-for-profit, it would be a signposter, it would be a befriending model, it would be somewhere where you could reach out and ask the uncomfortable questions, where you could tune into a podcast and you could join a support group. You could feel that people understood, and you could also feel like you might gain access, dare I say it, somewhat quicker than sometimes it felt like you would need to wait to do with statutory services. No, I'm not going to say we've got that all right with Wednesday's Child, and certainly we found it challenging. We got off to a flying start in some respects around COVID because there was a great deal more funding around for not-for-profits that were able to support people with mental health. In subsequent years, it has continued to be really difficult to get funding support for youth mental health services of different kinds, not least because of so many strains and pains that are going on in the country and funding shortages. But we are very much still here. We still provide a befriending model, and the likes of myself, Sarah, and a handful of other people provide at least weekly telephone calls to people that we have befriending relationships with. I have another person that I have befriended for many years who I am now not in such regular contact with, but in part because she is so stupendously far along on her recovery journey, which I'm delighted about. But those befriending relationships continue even when they slip away from being the weekly reliant services that they once were. We very much hope in 2024 and in the coming weeks and months to get going again with another carer support group, which is done by teams, and we hope to kickstart that again because we know how important that was when we were running it for parents and carers. And my post bag continues to be full of letters, mails, messages from spouses, partners, siblings, parents who want to just have a place to talk and have someone hear how scared they are, how frightened they are, how unsure they are about their loved one's eating disorder journey. In the last couple of weeks, I've heard from a husband whose wife is expecting a baby. I've heard from a woman who has been married to her longtime girlfriend for a couple of years now, and she is scared that their marriage won't make it because her new wife is desperately poorly with an eating disorder. I've heard from a number of parents. I've heard from a couple of teachers since Christmas as well, who are deeply concerned, from a matron at a boarding school. And all of those sorts of people we are able to support in the parent and carer group. So please look out for that. If that's something you feel you would like to join, you can just dip into that anonymously, and you can sit in the background with your camera off and you don't need to say a thing, or you can ask a question if you wish to. We invite expert guests to have their say on those sessions, and equally you'll just hear from Sarah and I as we exchange our experiences. So that's a little bit about where we were and where we are now. What I would say to those of you that continue to send emails and to reach out and to say, help me, where do I go from now? And that could be someone who you yourselves are experiencing an eating disorder, or it could be someone who is just tortured by what you are watching your loved one go through. I would say, please know recovery is possible. And I pause and hold that there because I know some people disagree with me, but recovery is possible. I think it's vital that you and your family, your network, your loved one, you need to believe in that, and you need to have a focus on thinking recovery is possible, the fight is worthwhile, and we must go forward with that motivation. The more you believe anything is a given, that it's impossible, that it is pointless, why would you persist in the pain of dredging through the hurt of what took you to that dark place of an eating disorder? Why would you go through the struggle of overcoming all that you feel about your relationship with food and exercise and body image? You have to believe it's possible. And I do. I'm never I'm never someone who naively says, absolutely, eating disorder recovery is possible and dot 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 it's easy and dot 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 I never think about it again and dot 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 I'm just as normal as the next person. I don't happen to say that and believe that, and I'm sure there may be other people out there who have a different experience to me. There will also be other people who say they absolutely don't think it's possible at all. Where I sit is I believe recovery is possible, but I also believe it would be naive to say when you have been through something as horrendous as particularly in someone like my case, a severe and enduring eating disorder, which went on for, a very long period of time. So, over a decade, let's say. Anybody that goes through something for that passage of their life, it's never going to be an easy fix. And it's never going to be something that you just shut in a cupboard and never reflect on. So when someone says to me, do you ever have a wobble? Do you ever think about behaviors again? I'll always be really honest, and I I I no longer see it like, the whiskey bottle that looms large on the counter side in my kitchen and begs me to drink it. I don't see it like that. I think of it as the thing that when you are going through more trauma, more difficulties, more of an energy drain emotionally and physically in life, when something is happening, and trust me, I know I'm going through a bit of that at the moment. When something is happening in life and it's going to be hard, I find myself thinking, I need my tribe more than ever. I need my tribe and I need my belief and I need my toolkit. And anybody that has listened to our podcasts, has listened to Sarah and I talk, will know that we talk about that toolkit over and over and over again. It's about, what do I have? What weapons do I have? What are my choice tools that when things are really shit, frankly, when they are really tough, what do I reach for? So for me, I know that my go-to when I start to feel life is challenging, it's going to be a struggle, I'm going to feel frightened, or I'm anxious about what's coming down the tracks, as I say, as something that I can feel happening in my own life at the moment, I say to myself, I cannot be alone in this. I cannot ignore the opportunity to build that tribe around me. I must not go silent. I must reach out, and I have to remind myself of that. When I do that, it immediately creates that network of the opportunity to do two things: to socialize, which is key to me, it's an oxygen, and to eat and to have well-being. When I withdraw from socializing, I suddenly disengage in the very things that bring me joy around eating. It's breaking bread together in the most biblical sense. And for me, I put the two together. So, you know, I have some wonderful friends who I just almost know those magic words I need to say if ever in life things are just becoming a little bit wearisome or I'm a little bit anxious. And this is particularly true of my circumstance because I don't happen to be married or have children at the moment. So it'll be very different for someone who's just in a crazy, crazy household and there are always kids running around needing fish fingers and baked beans in their, in their tummies every day. It'll be very, very different for them. But for me, I know I have to create a healthy routine of reaching out to prevent there being any decline in my well-being. So I guess that's my very long-winded way of saying when I'm asked about do I think an eating disorder is ever over, I think yes, it can be, and recovery is possible, but I'm ever mindful about the things for which I need to keep my eyes open if life becomes tougher. And who knows, maybe those are the very things that would become tough if I'd never gone through an eating disorder anyway. But I'm just saying that for me, it's always about tribe and toolkit. When you feel weaker, when you feel low, when you feel that your motivation is not as rocket fueled as it once was for whatever reason, even if that's just a little chapter and time in your life, that's for me where I need my tribe and my toolkit. So I'm not going to make this a massively long solo flying podcast episode, but I just thought let's just talk a little bit about motivation. So this is really helpful, I think, for anybody who themselves is going through an eating disorder recovery journey. Um, and equally for the parent, the partner, the spouse, the sibling that is persistently, consistently sitting down with that person and trying to say, please want more in your life than this. Please fight. Please get yourself well. And that person is saying, but why? Why would I? What's there for me? I don't want life. I can't see it. It's pointless. I think we always have to remind that person to think about motivation. Motivation. So if you can remember one sentence, make it this, please. It's not what's the matter with you. It's what matters to you. So have a think about that. What does matter to you? Does art? Does travel? Does achieving a career? Does becoming a wife, a mother, a father, a husband? Does one day running your own business, owning your own home? What matters to you? Keep that in mind rather than, oh, what's the matter with you? Think about what matters to you and it becomes a motivator from which to spark the flame to help you heal. So let's just briefly think about that motivation. So here are some of the things that should motivate you to want to recover from eating disorder. So one, let's talk about physical health recovery. So for me, a massive physical health recovery. I mean, oh gosh, what a motivation that is to forever want to look after my well-being because of what the eating disorder did to me physically. I was one of those classic cases of becoming in my early 20s osteoporotic. Yes, I had the body of probably an 80-year-old in terms of diagnosis when I was in my 20s because my body had stopped producing the necessary estrogen. I was no longer having my period. In my early 20s, I was not only osteopenic, but I had osteoporosis. And subsequently, that has meant I have fractured, hurt, wounded, and broken lots of bones very easily. A couple of years ago, some of you will know from the podcast, managed to break a flipping femur. I mean, for goodness sake, that's one of the toughest bones you can break. And I broke it walking into the side cupboard in my mum's house. Okay. How do you do that? You do that by sheer stupidity of having an eating disorder, which costs you osteoporosis in your 20s. So physical health. Get well for strong physical health. It prevents organ damage, osteoporosis, heart problems. You'll feel stronger. You'll have greater vitality, overall well-being. You'll be stronger, more powerful. Get well for improved physical health. While we're talking about health, let's talk about mental health. And and even I think only in the last 24 hours, I was talking to a parent about this. The two things we talk about so much in eating disorder recovery are nutritional rehabilitation, NR, and neural rewiring, NR. The neural rewiring bit is really, really important because that's the mental health bit. That's where we're rebuilding those important synapses in the brain that help us to understand life with better cognitive function. So eating disorder recovery means you get that enhanced mental health. So eating disorders, as we all know, they're intertwined with mental health. So depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, they feed, no pun intended, on the existence of our eating disorder. But we get our eating disorder in check, and I know it's kind of like a catch-22, what comes first. But when you have recovery from an eating disorder, all those things, the emotional stability, the self-confidence, the increased positive self-image, they are all improved. And my God, do we radiate that to the world? So get well for improved mental health as well as physical health. And I want to just move on to the word control. I have a slight kind of thing about where I'll go and deliver workshops, as I often do, about eating disorders, and people say, is it all about control, control, control? And I know lots of people have read that in textbooks, so they feel the need to ask that. Is it about control? Yeah, there's a lot in control. And I can say in my own story, my world was incredibly out of control at the point that I succumbed to my eating disorder. And yes, maybe I felt that the only thing I could control at the time was the pathetic amount of food I allowed myself and the amount of steps I took in a day. But, an eating disorder gives you absolutely no control. It has control over you. It claims your life. When you get eating disorder recovery, you have autonomy once more. You're making choices. You're aligning with your values, your desires. When you have the control is when you have embraced recovery and not before. Before then, when you are living in an eating disorder, it is only the eating disorder that is controlling you. That feeling when you wake up in the morning and you're not sure what you're allowed to eat, when you can eat, what time you can eat, how long you can go between meals. That's not really you controlling the day. That's your eating disorder controlling the day. Getting well means you reclaim control. I'm going to go on now to talk about relationships because it's perhaps, well, there's no perhaps about it. It's pivotal to life itself, isn't it? So whether we're talking about sexual relationships, whether we're talking about relationships with best friend, work colleagues, relationships with people in our community, we should all be motivated by the thought of recovering enough to strengthen, rebuild, because lots of people's relationships do fall down during an eating disorder, and sustain relationships and connections with those around us. That can be achieved when we achieve eating disorder recovery. So if some of you out there are thinking, I hate the relationship I now have with my parents, my partner, please don't think that's over. You can foster those better relationships by achieving recovery from your eating disorder. The person that you long to love again most likely longs to love you again. They just fell out of love with the person that was your eating disorder. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that's a very big motivator to all of you. The other thing is about goals and dreams. And I'm going to end on that last motivator, but this one about goals and dreams goes right back to what I said at the start of this around what matters to you. If I could ask you to do one thing every day that perhaps you've not done before in your recovery, is to think about journaling. I am not saying you have to write pages and pages and pages every day. Maybe just for now, a sentence just before bed, or a paragraph, or you might scribble an entire page. You might never read it again from day to day, but it's a great little, this is a phrase I use with my clients all the time when I'm saying to chuck down notes. It's a brain dump. You don't need to be articulate and eloquent or elegant. You can scribble all over the place with this. It's a brain dump of thoughts, but it allows you to dream, aspire, believe, and create that vision in those pages of that journal. And I think as you go forward with your recovery, those aspirations, those dreams and future endeavors, they look more feasible. But it's almost really important to commit those to paper by way of gaining the focus and enabling you to remember that you are that capable human being who still has space in your brain to pursue your passions and your goals, and to believe, whether these are related to hobbies or careers or love or life itself, that they are possible. So let's string that all the way back to what motivates us. Let's get healthier in mind and in body. Let's regain control. Let's improve our relationships. And let's allow ourselves the ability to pursue our goals and our dreams. Well, I hope that was a very helpful, if not slightly less animated, episode of the Wednesday Child podcast than what it is sometimes when Sarah and I are having banter. But it's been a half an hour listening, I'm sure, just to get maybe a different perspective that you might on this particular day have needed to tune into. I do always welcome your insights, your questions, your thoughts. So whether you're listening to this thinking, I've really got to ask this about myself or about someone I love, or maybe you're listening to this and you're thinking, I am an expert in ... and I'd love to chat to you on the podcast about this, please reach out. I will directly respond to those emails. So all you have to do is send me a message to debbie@wednesdayschild.co.uk. And I love to hear from you. Sometimes it takes me a little bit longer than others, so forgive me. But it is always really, really nice to hear from you. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. And I shall see you again very, very soon. And maybe with a return from my co-host, Sarah. Thank you.